Hello. In this lecture, we're going to do some more work with strings and do some string formatting. We're also going to write some interactive programs where we display messages to the user and get input from the user. Let's get started. We'll call Python's built-in function print, passing a single argument to the function call. In this case, we'll pass the string hello, and hello will be displayed to the screen. Notice that when hello is displayed, it's displayed without the quotation marks. The quotes are only for Python's internal string representation, and they're not seen by the user. Let's call print again, passing a mathematical expression as an argument to the function. In this case, the expression is 3 plus 7 minus 3, and that expression will first be evaluated and then printed to the screen. We'll call print a third time, passing in two arguments this time, two strings, hello and there. And when the strings are displayed, they're displayed with a space between them by default. So hello space there is what's printed to the screen. Now we will define two functions. We'll define the functions in a file named calc.py that I've already created and saved. Both functions will calculate the square of a number. One function will return that result, and the other will print it. We begin the function definition with the word def, and the name of this function is square return. It will take a single parameter, I'm calling this num, and the job of this function is to return num to the power of 2. The second function, its name will be square print. It also has a single parameter, num, and it's also going to calculate the square of num, but rather than returning that value, this function will print it. In a moment, we will call these two functions from the shell. I'd like the output of the call to print to look different from the value returned by square print. To do this, I'm adding a string to the list of arguments for the print function call, so that it will display the square of num is before the squared number. The next step is to run the module. We'll go to the Run menu and choose Run Module, and now we have access to the two functions in the shell. We're going to call these two functions, and we will store the result of calling those functions in a variable. So the variable answer return will get the result of calling the function square return. We're going to pass an argument to square return, and I'm picking the value 4. I could pick any value here, but I'm using 4 just as an example function call. It's now time to run the function. When this function executes, we want to watch to see whether anything is printed. And we can see, when we execute it now, that we immediately get the prompt, so nothing was printed to the screen by square return. Next, we want to check the value of the answer return variable. And we can see that answer return refers to the value 16. So square return returned the memory address of 16, and that memory address was stored in the answer return variable. Now it's time to call the function square print. We'll also pass the value 4 as the argument. We could have picked anything. And we see this time that something is displayed to the screen. The square of num is 16. Next, we'll examine the contents of the variable answer print. And this time, we don't see anything. When a function does not have a return statement that gets executed, Python will return none, and that's what happens in this case. Because answer return refers to a numeric value, we're able to use it in a mathematical expression, such as multiplying it by 5. However, answer print does not refer to a numeric value. We get an error message in this case because it refers to the value none, which is of type none type. We now know how to use Python's built-in function print to display messages to users. The next step is to use Python's built-in function input to get information from the user. We'll call input, passing a single string as an argument to it. In this case, we're going to ask the user, "What is your name?" When the function executes, that string will be printed to the screen, and we will wait for the user to type some input at the prompt. So notice that the cursor is flashing, waiting for us to type something. I will now type my name as the user of this program. I say my name is Jen, And when I hit enter, the function completes its execution. The string that I typed, JEN, is returned as a string by the function. We see that there are single quotes around it, indicating that the value is type string. We'll call the function input a second time. This time, though, we will store the result returned by input in a variable named name. When we execute the function, the user types their name, and that value is returned as a string. So the memory address of the value is stored in the name variable. And when we examine the contents of name, we see that it refers to the string Jen. We will now use input to prompt the user to enter their location. The string, what is your location, gets printed, and I enter my location, Toronto. That value is returned by the function, so location refers to the value Toronto, and name refers to Jen. Let's now use the two variables, name and location, to display a message back to the user. We're going to call print, passing in 3 arguments. The first is the name, the second will be a string saying lives in, and the third is the location. So the way we interpret this call to print is that first we'll use the value that name refers to, joining that with a space between it and the string lives in. And next, we'll use a space and the value that location refers to print Jen lives in Toronto. Earlier, I mentioned that name and location both refer to strings. In fact, the type of all values returned by input will be type string. Let's call input again, asking how many cups of coffee I've had today. When I enter a value as the user, I enter 2, and this value is returned by the input function as a string. So we can see that num coffee refers to the string 2, not to the int 2. You've already seen that we can use single quotes and double quotes to represent strings. And now I want to show you a third string format, which is triple quoted strings. Triple quoted strings are able to span multiple lines. For example, let's print a triple quoted string with how on the first line, R on the second, and U on the third line. So that looks like this, 1 word per line. I'm going to use the same string, only rather than printing it, I'll store it in a variable. And when we examine the contents of variable S, it looks a lot different from what we inputted. First of all, it doesn't have triple quotes anymore, it has single quotes. And secondly, in the places where I had hit the enter key or the return key, we see this \n in 2 places. That character is called the new line character, and it's a special character in Python. The \ symbol is the escape character, and this combination of \ and n is the escape sequence new line. There are several other special characters. For example, let's print the numbers 3, 4, and 5 separated by tabs. So we use 3, and then for the tab symbol, we use the escape sequence \t, 4, \t, and 5. So 3 tab, 4 tab, 5. And that's what it looks like. In addition to new line and tab, there are several other escape sequences. A couple that will be useful for us are the escape sequence \\, which we use whenever we want to print a single backslash or include a single backslash in a string. That's because the \ character is the escape character, and when we use it on its own, we get an error message because it expects that something follows it. Another useful sequence is the single quote sequence for when we want to include a single quote within our string. For example, if I want to say don't, then I use \quote for the place where I'd like the single quote to occur. And similarly, when I want to use quotation marks, double quotation marks in a string, I can use the escape sequence \double quotes. So imagine that we want to do this. We say he says, and I use backslash double quotes to indicate that I would like to use the double quote in the string.